And hi, this is Paul Gibbons. I want to welcome you to a YouTube video. I think you're going to find this content fascinating. It's from a conference I did in China, a virtual conference, dare I say, because of course it was in 2020. And it was the Neuroscience for Leaders conference, which was a really star-studded event. And I want to thank, before I begin, Ella Chang for organizing it, for subtitling the video, and for being the entrepreneur she is and the difference she makes in the world. She did a fabulous job. So what's in this video? You're going to hear about happiness and human flourishing and the meaning of life. And I've hoped to make it interesting. We're going to talk about television shows like Breaking Bad and Money Heist and Game of Thrones. And I love to use pop culture metaphors. And in the second half of the video, we're going to talk about things which I think are really dear to you personally. We're going to talk about purpose. We're going to talk about human purpose and your personal purpose and how to find that, and the link between human purpose and corporate purpose. And then finally, we're going to lead into and finish with a conversation about sustainability. So I really hope you enjoy the content. Let's get into the video. Happiness, if you look at the bookshelves, I always think you can study a culture by seeing the books that are in the bookstore and what people buy and what people spend money on. And there are, to my count, about 500 books on happiness, give or take it. The most highly paid speakers on the conference circuit talk about happiness. So, is happiness the answer to the meaning of life? It's a question we should ask ourselves. One of the problems with the happiness disease, as I call it, is we are taught to compare ourselves with this, with the way people look and with the way people smile, the way people look on the outside. And what one sociologist called Arlie Hochschild from Holland has said is that that is called emotional labor. The thought that you need to be always on, always smiling, always high-fiving, always living the dream, and everything like that. And the fact of human life is, it isn't like that. It's not like that at all. In fact, there are moments where we feel lonely, where we feel tired, where we feel anxious, where we feel sad, where we feel angry. So life doesn't always look, and I don't think it should be, always beaming smiles from the cover of a magazine or a cover of a newsbook. And the problem with that idea, this is going to annoy me if I have to keep going backwards. The problem with that idea is when you compare your internal life with the way you think your internal life should look, the people smiling from the happiness books. Yeah, it makes a sad day sadder. It makes an anxious day more anxious. It makes a bad day worse because you're entitled to think, well, there's something wrong with me. I don't get the plot and I should be happy and everybody else is happy. And that's a psychological trap called comparing your inside reality with others' outsides. How others look on the outside, happy, I'm living the dream, with your insides can make you feel less than. So comparison isn't your friend. And from as early as Greek times, aiming at happiness was a guarantee of being unhappy. So this isn't Paul Gibbons' idea. This is Greek philosophy from 2,500 years ago. It's a paradox that the more you grasp something, the more you try and make yourself happy, the less happy you will be. Happiness is the product of a well-lived life. It's the product of a good life. It's the product of the virtuous life. It's the product of a fulfilled life. And so what we find, research shows, is it's actually small sensual pleasures that make people happiness. The smell of cooking coming from a kitchen, a hug from someone that loves you, or some animal that loves you, might be your dog. The first sip of coffee in the morning, the sound Netflix makes when your first show comes on the day, the sound a book makes when you open a new book, the crackling of the spine, watching small children play, those sensual pleasures are things that thing. And people who are truly happy in life, it's not about the big things. It's not about the big things like money and having the great job and everything like that. It's being able to take pleasure and joy in the day-to-day of existence, in the step-by-step, the person at the grocery store, giving them a smile or getting a smile from them. Those are the things that make people happy, is focusing on the sensual and the small. Also, happiness is partly genetic. If you take twins and you raise twins in different environments, rich and poor, different countries, a city environment or a rural environment, their level of happiness is very highly correlated, which means that, again, it's very bad to compare yourself with how happy you think you should be, because at least part of how happy you are is determined by your genes.
And the other thing we find is it's got almost nothing to do with money. There are a lot of people in the world, Alibaba and Amazon and most of the world in advertising is there to persuade us that if we spend money and we have enough, that somehow we'll be happy. But here's some research from economics called the Easterlin paradox, is that people who are really poor, who get given some money, enough to exist, get quite a lot happier than when they were struggling to exist. But beyond a certain point, money doesn't make you any happier. Now that's a thing that it seems obvious perhaps to people here in this conversation with Ella and this summit, but it's not something that's viewed as standard in society. In society, we still tend to believe, and there's actually evidence that shows as people get wealthier than the middle there, happiness begins to fall off. Isn't that interesting? So money isn't really, for the people in this call and from most people in the developed world, the middle of the world and above, doesn't make you happier. So what does make you happier? That's from a Chinese poet whose name I forget. Ella, help me out. Put in the chat which poet that is.
Oh my God.
If you know. You have to know, Ella. Come on. Which poet is that?
Dao. I will put in the chat box. Oh.
One of you guys, Fan, I'm going to say this wrong. Fan Zhongyan. Is that right?
Fan Zhongyan.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Fan Zhongyan.
Yeah, there you go. And he said that the meaning of life to become happy is caring for people and living according to the Tao. The Greeks philosophers 2,500 years ago, I'm more familiar with them than I am with Chinese philosophers from 2,000 years ago, said the virtuous life was the meaningful life. The Romans thought it was valor and courage. The Epicurean philosophers thought it was pleasure and hedonism. Humanists think in terms of social justice. Environmentalists think in terms of healthy biosphere. Romantic poets think of love as the meaning of life. People that are interested in natural spirituality think about caring for the life. So we have a number of things that give life meaning and contribute to the good life. And if you live a good life, more likely you'll be happy. And so if we move on to a couple of thought experiments from philosophy. So Harvard philosopher Robert Nozick devised a thought experiment. And please do this thought experiment with you. Scientists have designed a machine. And this machine is called the experience machine. And you can walk into this machine and then close the door in the machine, and it will give you experiences that make you happy. It will deliver pleasure on demand, and it will deliver only those kind of experiences. For you, you won't know the difference between it and the real life, right? Because your experience, as your brain receives it, it doesn't matter where it comes from, right? That's an old philosophical problem discussed in the Matrix. So would you walk into the pleasure and experience machine? And most people say no. Well, that's interesting. We have lives that are sometimes happy and sometimes sad. Why would people not want to be in the pleasure and experience machine? And that's interesting. It's because we want purpose in our lives. We just don't want to feel things. We want to feel our own agency, our ability to achieve. We want an identity, and we value diverse experiences. And so one of the people who started to think about questions like that was Abraham Maslow. That model is from 1943. In fact, by 1960 and 70, Maslow had sort of discarded this, and his thinking had moved far, far beyond to include spirituality, to include notions of service. But this is the only piece of his legacy that most of the world knows. I want to remind us of the movie The Matrix, too. If you remember this bad guy from The Matrix, Cypher, who betrays his people, he's looking at a piece of steak and he's saying, I know this isn't real, and I know the Matrix is programming it into my brain, but you know what? I don't care. I just want. The ignorance is bliss. And so most people don't think like that. Most people don't want the pleasure machine, and they don't want to live in some kind of matrix. And so let's do another thought experiment. I study a lot of philosophy, and all philosophers do is they do thought experiments. Is a soldier serving their country, would you describe, are they doing that to be happy? Is caring for a sick friend something you do in order to be happy? Does it make you happy sitting with someone who might be dying or very ill? Does reaching the top of your profession, does studying chess, as this guy, the World Chess Championship, does 14 hours a day, studying and playing chess, does you do that to be happy? No. Does working towards a better world as an activist, does that make you happy? Does climbing the mountains of the world, does that make you happy? Does going to the moon, do these things create happiness? And the answer is maybe, but that's not why we do them. And why we do them comes from human flourishing, which is a model from positive psychology from Martin Seligman and some other people. And I've adapted his model to talk about human flourishing at work. So one of the things, if you'll think about the pictures that we just left behind, that is important in life is spiritual fulfillment, having purpose and meaning. Another is engagement, feeling that our distinct capacities as human beings are being stretched to the maximum. Nurturing relationships. You know, the Harvard Health Study was begun almost 100 years ago to study the largest group of, it was only men, sadly, and the greatest predictor of health and longevity and a number of other outcomes, well-being and so forth, was the quality of relationships. That's interesting. Not how happy you are, not how kind of job you are, not how much loss you had suffered in your life, but the quality of relationships that you had was the greatest predictor of health. Interesting stuff, right? And that human beings, we're born to achieve. We're born for excellence and competence and feeling our own agency. And we, of course, like positive affect. We like happiness and optimism and a good anticipation of the future. And so on my blog, I don't blog very much, like almost never. However, there's a quiz that asks you questions about, are you flourishing at work? So I feel through my work I'm contributing something worthwhile, or I'm engaged and interested. I look forward to Monday mornings. I constantly achieve success. I have supportive and nurturing work relationships. So that quiz is on my website, and it's one that I think you'd enjoy doing. But we've gone through happiness is the goal of life and said no. We've gone through Maslow and the pleasure machine, and we've said no. We've gone through human flourishing, and I'm about to say no to that we still haven't quite got it. Because Maslow and happiness and flourishing are still primarily focused on the self. When you self-actualize, to use Maslow's words, it's still about you. When you find meaning in life, it's your meaning and not collective shared meaning. When you achieve, it's still about you. It's not necessarily for the good of the world. And so we want to think about human superpowers, those things that we do that can't be replaced by robots and artificial intelligence. So robots are now stronger than us, and they're more precise than us, and we're still just at the dawn of robotics. They can also out-crunch us on many problems. I mean, the very fact that I could put subtitles on here, I can click a button and it will have subtitles. That voice recognition is something that was thought that AI would never be able to do. So that robotics and AI demand upon us as human beings to think about what we can do that will not be replaced. Because there's things that we can do that will be replaced. And they say, McKinsey says that almost 50% of jobs by the year 2050 will be replaced or changed or gone due to the revolution in artificial intelligence and robotics. So what are human superpowers? And again, I want to do a thought experiment with you. And so here's the thought experiment on human superpowers. Imagine that you could transport yourself back 50,000 years ago. You're in a spaceship and you're overlooking Africa. And you look down upon Africa and you see a bunch of mammals running around, right? You see humans and zebras and antelopes and cheetahs and lions and bisons and saber-toothed tigers and all of that. And you look at them and you're called upon to guess which one of these will come to dominate the planet. Now, human beings at that time, give or take, there were only about 500,000 of us on the planet, much less than the population of other mammals. We are not as strong as other mammals. We're not as fast. We don't have fangs and claws for aggression as predators. We're also very soft. We don't have protective scaling or covering. We can't run fast enough to get away from a cheetah, or certainly not a velociraptor. So would you have bet on us? And the answer is probably not, unless you knew something special about what was going on up here. And one of the things that we did better than any other species is we collaborated, and which is why it makes me sad today when I see countries and the world polarized in conflict, because the thing that makes human beings so special is our ability to collaborate together. The other thing we can do is with our great brain is we can imagine different worlds. Other mammals, as far as we know, do not do that. I can think about the way the world could be. I can have a vision. And one of the great tools for leadership is being able to communicate that vision so people imagine a different world. And that faculty of imagination allows us to do amazing things. It allows abstract thoughts so that we can't just think about, look, there's a tiger right in front of me there, we have to run. But it's about potential tigers or animals like tigers, or a tiger was here last Tuesday, or maybe tigers will come here to the watering hole to get water. We can think in abstract ways about families of things. And that allows us to plan and predict and do the magnificent things we have. We also have metacognition, a highly developed frontal cortex, which allows us to see ourselves seeing. Other mammals, as far as we know, they think, they know their thought processes. Parrots can speak, chimpanzees can speak. Mammals, we're learning more about how clever other animal species are all the time. But as far as we know, that metacognition is not something that they possess. We see ourselves. And that's one of the things that, of course, Buddhist mindfulness practices seek to develop, is that ability to see yourself seeing, to be the witness, and only then to stand above your emotions and your thinking, and in a sense, be the director on the stage to move things appropriately. I want to talk a little bit about play. I love to play. I'm a gamer, is one of the things I mostly do with my spare time. But how is playfulness useful? Other animals play. You see kittens playing and everything like that, but humans play far more. But what has that got to do with a superpower? Well, it is a superpower, and I'll tell you why it's a superpower, because it's the spark of invention. Play is a spark of invention. Children, we see them playing and everything like that. We try and control the play. We have play dates for 45 minutes, and we have structured activities. But that playfulness, that free play, is what enabled the human to take a lion. If a human mother killed a lioness, only she would think, oh, well, let's try and see if the skin will keep us warm, or if the bones or antlers could be weapons from a stag or a gazelle or something like that. That playfulness is part of our innovative, inventive nature, and curiosity, of course. So, and the other thing we have other animals don't have is symbolic thought and reasoning. And so those are the things that have made us special. And as we move into a more technologically enhanced world where machines can do more stuff for us, we want to think about, to use a term from economics, our competitive advantage that will still allow us to flourish as we did 100,000 years ago. And so I've got a couple more thoughts. One of the things that I think is, I disagree with some people who write also about this topic, is being the best in the world is really important. Now, it's not important for you. I'll tell you why. It's important for the world. Roger Bannister, an Englishman, broke the 4-minute mile. I don't remember what that is in kilometers. That would be a 2.5-minute 1 kilometer. And until he did that in the 1950s, people had been trying for a century in the Olympics to do it. And some people thought it was physically impossible that humans would ever run a mile in under 4 minutes. But you know what happened when Roger Bannister did it? Everybody does it. High school students today can run 4-minute miles. You know, that record that had been unbeaten for 100 years, and then all of a sudden it tumbled and it tumbled and it tumbled and it tumbled, and now, it's kind of a standard for running. And so when you're the best in the world, if you're directed at noble purposes for the world, you're doing something for the world, because you remind human beings of what we are all capable. What one of us can excel at, all of us we can all excel at. Excellence for one of us sets a standard and an inspiration for all of us. And so whether you're a missionary, whether you're an architect building the Burj Khalifa, whether you're a football player, whether you're running the Human Genome Project, whether you're Mikhail Baryshnikov, whether you're a great classic scholar like Mary Beard, whether you're like Magnus Carlsen, the world's biggest chess problem, that spirit of mastery, again, is part of, I think, what makes the good life, and something that, well, I spend half a chapter in the book talking more about it, so I won't go any further. And then there's one other thing, is I said that mastery, just being good at being a fascist, isn't such a good, good thing for the world, right? We need our spirit of mastery conjoined with universal values that are important to humans. And the Greeks, from whom I'm very fond, talked about truth. This is really annoying. Truth, beauty, and goodness. Truth, beauty, and goodness. Doctors Without Borders, the Lotus building is it in Shanghai? I think it is, yes. And is it in Beijing? I can't remember. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm showing my ignorance. And Plato's Academy. Those were thought to be the most important things that human could aim at. But what do things look like today? Well, the most profitable company in the world over the last 100 years, that's their stock market performance, makes cigarettes. When we design places to live, where we design offices, where we design shopping, too frequently we just throw some ugliness down there. Business not only doesn't make the planet better on a day-by-day business, sometimes it does things like that. And certainly, if you look at politics in my own country, particularly, truth is not something that is important to the current leadership cadre. Think for a minute about this. If you visit someone's home, and they say, you can have my house for a week, we'll do a house swap. A good ethical standard, a moral standard would be you leave it better than you found it. You certainly don't leave broken dishes. You certainly don't leave a mess. You leave it just that little bit cleaner, and that's a good standard. But day by day, human beings on the planet don't leave it better. We leave it just a little bit worse, sometimes quite a lot worse, whether it's deforestation or atmospheric pollution or the river that's shown in this picture. We don't have a standard and duty of care towards the place, the home that we live in. And by the way, it's the only one we're going to get. So we don't leave it better on a daily basis. We leave it, often quite a lot worse. And so these are things that we need to think about. Truth, beauty, and goodness. And so, the goals have been talked about. I'm not the first person to talk about these things. The Millennium Development Goals, ending hunger, education, gender equality, reducing child mortality, maternal deaths, malaria, HIV, sustainability, working in partnership. The Millennium Development Goals have evolved into the Sustainable Development Goals, and they are, I think, universal enough where not a lot of human beings would look at the Sustainable Development Goals and say they're misguided. They might say they're too optimistic, but I haven't met a human being that would say, it really doesn't matter. We can deplete the oceans, we can deplete the biosphere, we can deplete the forests, we can live with the poverty in the world, 2 billion children that don't have enough to eat. All of those are livable. And no one thinks that. What most people think is that's too big. I don't want to worry about it. I just want to watch Netflix. I'm kind of kidding, but you know what I mean. It's not something that we spend enough time thinking about, but some businesses do. There are businesses in Europe particularly, there may be some in the East, I don't know. There are certainly, I don't think, any in the United States, which is a sad thing, who put the Sustainable Development Goals right there in our strategy. What can a company like Unilever do to help combat child poverty? What can they do to help promote gender equality? What can they do to provide clean drinking water? What can they do to have the biosphere more sustainable? And so the greatest companies in the world are thinking about their purpose. Remember, we started with human purpose, our meaning of life. Now we're talking the meaning of life for business, the purpose for business. And there are companies that are putting this into their strategy. And for me, it's one of the most inspiring things because business is the most powerful institution on the planet. It's much more powerful than many governments. And so that for me is Noble's purpose. That for me is inspiring. And when you're talking about meaning on a collective level, that's the kind of meaning that inspires me. And so leadership is, of course, going to be part of that. And again, I'm going to borrow from Chinese philosophy. Never has a man who has bent himself been able to make others straight. And so what that tells you about spirituality and about many humanistic personal development transitions, you have to start with yourself. You have to, I hate this expression because it's overused, but be the change. You need to develop yourself, but not just because you want to make yourself feel better. That's narcissism. Just working on personal development without a purpose, outer work, is narcissism. But having outer purposes, things you're trying to achieve in the world without inner work is futile. You need to do these two things together. And that's where the idea of spirituality in business is really powerful, because it combines the power of inner work, but also with noble outer purpose. And it umbrellas those two ideas really rather beautifully. And we need new models of leadership too. And so that's a model that I developed in 1997, 23 years ago. It's a systems model. Now, there are systems model like Ella's MEPS model, which are just about the self, but there are also the self as it operates in an organic system. And we need to think about that. So we need to think about collectives, culture, value, context, belonging, community. We need to think about the interior parts of the self as well as the exterior parts of the self. And so this is I could write about an entire book about just that model on the left. So we're not going to do that now. However, great leaders today need to think systemically. For example, let's take the COVID crisis. We wanted people structurally to wear masks, to social distance, to isolate. But one of the problems with that is that culture in certain parts of the United States fed back against that. And when culture fed back against it, people's mindset became changed by the culture. They saw it as a defense of their freedom. And so we were unable to control the spread of disease, control the metrics and the disease systems in the United States, which is why the United States has been a colossal failure in its attempt to combat COVID, is precisely because of a lack of systems thinking. And also, I just want to add, again, this is another model of mine I developed. It's a model of accountability in leadership. The first test of a leader is to be accountable by yourself. But if you're just accountable for yourself, you're not a leader. You need to be accountable for more. You need to be accountable for your team and your reports. And you learn that when you're a manager and you're 25 years old. I'm accountable for what they develop. If they deliver terrible results, guess whose job it is to develop them, coach them, organize them, help manage them, in order them to be excellent? It's my job. And so your accountability as you grow in your career in whatever profession. But at the very top, there are transcendent things. There are people like Greta Thunberg, who's fighting for a better planet. There's Elon Musk, who's fighting for electric vehicles and is fighting to get us to Mars. Those kind of transcendence are so inspirational for people. And so being accountable to that is why we admire people like Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela said, I'm going to free my people. The guy was in jail for 33 years. How can you say that you're going to liberate your country? Because he was so purpose-driven and so accountable. And in my own country, we have people who love to blame. They're not even on that pyramid as leaders because they don't even take responsibility for themselves. They fail at the first test. If you listen to communications from the government here, China is to blame for every problem that the United States has. Our industrial problems, our environmental problems, our COVID problems, whatever. Failing to take responsibility. You can't take responsibility as your head of your country for how your country is doing, and you want to be the victim and blame other things. You're not a leader, not yet. But we still confuse leadership with power over people. We still have Daenerys, who's with her Dracarys, would blow people up. Still have Vladimir Putin, who's a big hero, hitman leadership. We have the guy in my own country, because what we haven't developed as leaders is the will to serve. Too often it's the will to control. And I can explain it, I do explain it in my book, but the will to control is about easing the complexity and the randomness and the volatility of the world by trying to control it. And if I can just control the world, then maybe everything will be all right. If I can control relationships, if I can control my environment. But the true leadership development is to learn the will to serve, is the will to be transparent and humble and let emergence happen. And so this is my final slide. You'll all be relieved. But I think I've gone over. I do apologize. Spirituality in business, I think, can help us aim at our highest goals. It can help us develop human superpowers. It can help us use our higher faculties, metacognition, imagination, playfulness, curiosity, inventiveness, and also use science and not myth. It'll help us focus on the eternal, truth, beauty, goodness, help us lead with humility, accountability, and compassion. And so these are my 3 books. I reinvented myself in 2013. I became an author for the first time. The Yellow Book is, I think, number 1 on Amazon or number 2 in change management. This is number 5 or 6 in digital transformation and behavioral science. I'm mostly a scientist, and so today you got me talking about spirituality. Mostly what I talk about is science, and that's my book, which is out in 3 weeks, that I'm very, very proud of. And I want to thank you all deeply, deeply for listening, and I am sorry to Ella for going over. Over to you, Ella.